A $1.6 billion bet has just been placed on a piece of America where the ground is falling. Not from an earthquake, not from a tectonic shift. It is falling because something that has been there for millennia is being removed at an industrial scale. As of June 2026, the global dairy industry has committed $1.6 billion to build a new generation of massive cheese and dairy processing plants. They are rising today over the flat plains of the Texas Panhandle and western Kansas. But here's the detail that tells the real story. These colossal new facilities are being constructed directly on top of the fastest failing sections of the Ogallala Aquifer. Lenders and financial analysts are now watching this unfold, not with excitement, but with a quiet, creeping dread. They have seen the data. They know the trajectory. A 2025 study from the University of Tennessee and the USTA laid it bare. A 14-foot drop in the aquifer's water level was directly linked to a 26% spike in farm loan delinquencies. The water goes down. The bankruptcies go up. And in the Texas Panhandle, where some of these new factories are being built, the water has been going down for 70 years. The strangest part of this story is not that a company would build a factory to make cheese. It is that they are building it on land that is systematically running out of the single resource they need most, and what the numbers say is coming for all of it. To understand what is happening in the fields of Kansas and Texas, you have to understand the ground itself and the ocean of ancient water it holds. The Ogallala Aquifer is not an underground lake. It is not a vast, dark cavern full of water, despite what the popular imagination suggests. The water exists in the microscopic spaces between grains of sand, gravel, clay, and silt. It is a titanic, subterranean sponge stretching 174,000 square miles beneath portions of 8 states. From South Dakota down to the Texas Panhandle. It was named in 1898 by the geologist N.H. Darton, who first identified the unique geological strata near the town of Ogallala, Nebraska. This is the part the headlines do not capture. This formation holds what is called fossil water. It is water that fell as rain and melting glacial ice tens of thousands of years ago, slowly seeping into the earth. It is a closed system. The natural recharge rate from modern rainfall is agonizingly slow, blocked by impermeable clay layers and an arid climate that offers little precipitation to begin with. Scientists estimate that if the aquifer were ever to be fully depleted, it would take the planet anywhere from 500 to over 6,000 years to replenish itself naturally. The total volume of recoverable water is staggering. The U.S. Geological Survey's 2015 estimate put the figure at 2.91 billion acre-feet. That number is so large, it's almost meaningless. So think of it this way. It is nearly 1 quadrillion gallons of fresh water. For decades, a common error stated the aquifer held just 3 trillion gallons. The reality is more than 300 times larger, and we are draining it. Zoom out, and the history makes the mechanism of our current crisis horribly clear. Before the 1930s, this region of the High Plains was known by a different name, the Great American Desert. Farming was a gamble against the sky. The Dust Bowl was the catastrophic result of that gamble failing. But after World War II, everything changed. Farmers discovered that the same powerful internal combustion engines that had powered trucks and tanks could be hooked up to wells. They could reach down hundreds of feet and pull the fossil water to the surface. Then came the invention of center pivot irrigation in the late 1940s. These were spider-like contraptions that crawl across the landscape, turning arid prairie into lush green circles visible from space. The Great American Desert was transformed into one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth. It was a miracle. And it was a mining operation. The government uses the year 1950 as the official benchmark, the moment just before the Great Extraction began. They call it the pre-development level. And since 1950, the story has been one of accelerating decline. By 1986, the trend was so alarming that Congress passed the Water Resources Development Act, mandating the USGs to begin formally monitoring the aquifer's vital signs. The government was now officially watching the patient bleed. By June of 2017, the USGs released a comprehensive report that put a hard number on our 70-year overdraft. The aquifer had lost, permanently, 273 million acre-feet of water. 9% of its total volume, gone. The average water level across all 111.8 million acres had dropped by 15.8 feet. But that average hides a much more brutal reality. The depletion is not uniform. The southern portions are in a freefall. Now here's the part nobody saw coming. We did not need to drill more wells to see the damage. We could see it from orbit. Dr. J. Famiglietti, a global water expert at Arizona State University and a former senior scientist at NASA, has spent his career using a pair of satellites called GRACE for Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. These satellites orbit the Earth and measure infinitesimal changes in its gravitational field. When a massive amount of mass is removed from one part of the planet, like a few 100 million acre-feet of water, the gravitational pull in that spot gets weaker. The GRACE satellites detect that change. From 250 miles up, NASA was mapping a ghost. They were weighing the absence of water. In May of 2026, a new NASA analysis mapped this human footprint of depletion, revealing deep, blood-red zones of extreme water loss centered directly over Texas and Kansas, the very places where the new cheese factories are rising. This isn't just an environmental story. It is now a story about money, food, and political failure. The Ogallala yields 30% of all groundwater used for irrigation in the entire United States. It underpins nearly 20% of America's agricultural output. It is the water that grows our corn, our wheat, and our cotton. It is the water that fattens the cattle that become our beef. To drain the Ogallala is to drain the lifeblood from the American heartland. As Dr. Famiglietti has said, we need to sustain groundwater to sustain food production. And we're not doing it. But here's the detail that reveals the true perversity of the system. Farmers are, in many ways, paid by the government to drain the aquifer. Burt Griggs, a law professor at Washburn University and a leading scholar in Western water law, has pointed this out for years. Federal farm policies, specifically crop insurance programs, create a moral hazard. They guarantee farmers a certain income, which incentivizes them to plant the most profitable crop, not the most sustainable one. In the arid high plains, that often means planting incredibly thirsty crops like corn, which require massive amounts of irrigation, instead of more drought-tolerant traditional crops like sorghum or wheat. The government effectively subsidizes the extraction. If the crop fails due to drought, insurance pays out. If the pumps can pull enough water to make a crop, the farmer profits. The only variable that is not insured is the water level in the aquifer itself. It is a system of subsidized self-destruction. Looking at the policies that encourage this, Burt Griggs had one simple assessment for the future. A couple of generations from now, people are going to look back and say, what the hell were they thinking? And in 2026, the cliff edge is no longer theoretical. It is appearing on bank statements. The June 2026 reporting on the dairy expansion was not just about water. It was about credit. Lenders for agricultural loans are now, for the first time, systematically factoring aquifer decline into their risk assessments. A farm is no longer just its acreage and its equipment. It is the column of water underneath it. A recent study directly connected a 14-foot drop to a 26% explosion in loan delinquencies. Banks are realizing that they have been lending money against an asset that is literally vanishing into thin air through evaporation and into our food supply through irrigation. An operating loan for a farm in the Texas Panhandle, sitting above a section of the aquifer that might be functionally dry in 2 decades, is now seen as an unacceptably risky bet. The credit is starting to dry up before the wells do. Multi-generational farms are facing an economic death sentence, not because they are out of water today, but because their bank knows they will be tomorrow. The crisis is not just one of policy, but of geography. A groundbreaking study, published in the journal Earth's Future on June 5, 2026, traced groundwater availability across the entire United States. The lead author, Ashraf Rateb, and his team at the University of Texas confirmed a stark and intensifying divide. It is a tale of two Americas, split by the 98th meridian, a line of longitude that runs north-south through the eastern Dakotas down through central Texas. To the east of this line, groundwater levels are largely stabilizing or even recovering. The climate is wetter. Recharge is possible. To the west of this line, in the arid domain of the Ogallala, the story is one of what the study calls irreversible exhaustion. The combination of low rainfall and high agricultural extraction has trapped the high plains in a terminal decline that the wetter east has escaped. The Ogallala is geographically doomed in a way other aquifers are not. This geographical story becomes intensely local when you look at the map. The crisis is a patchwork of unequal suffering. Look at Southwest Kansas Groundwater Management District 3. This is the agricultural heart of the state. In 2024, they recorded their steepest single-year depletion ever. The water level fell by 1.52 feet in a single season. For the farmers there, that number is not an abstraction. It means their wells have to go deeper. It means their pumping costs go up. It means the physical distance between their livelihood and failure just got 18 inches shorter. Then travel north to Nebraska. The state is an anomaly. It is the lucky one. Geologically, it sits over the deepest, most voluminous part of the aquifer. 65% of the Ogallala's total water volume resides under Nebraska. Its management has been stricter, its declines far slower. And yet, even here, the warning signs are flashing. The 2026 statewide monitoring report noted that after a persistent drought, average groundwater levels fell by another 0.29 feet in 2025. In the state's Panhandle, local drops were severe, exceeding 10 feet in some areas. Nebraska has more water, but it is not immune to the logic of withdrawal exceeding deposit. It is simply running a slower burning fever. Then there is the Texas Panhandle. Here, the timeline is not measured in centuries, but in decades. In some of the most heavily irrigated counties, hydrologists and local water managers give grim, off-the-record estimates. They say that at current rates, usable water for irrigation could be gone in 20 years. Not low, not expensive. Gone. And it is here, in the epicenter of the crisis, that a billion-dollar investment in water-intensive dairy processing is taking root. It is a collision of long-term geological reality and short-term economic hope. A gamble that technology, or a change in the weather, or some other miracle will intervene before the pumps start sucking air. Occasionally, the system delivers a head fake, a brief moment of false hope. In April 2026, the Kansas Geological Survey reported that for the first time since 2019, water levels in one of their districts in western Kansas actually saw a tiny increase. After a period of above-average rainfall, the level rose by 0.18 feet. It broke a brutal 30-year trend that had seen an average decline of over half a foot every single year. The news was celebrated. It was a sign that the aquifer could respond to rain. But this is the part that is so often missed. That small reprieve was the result of unusually good weather. The long-term decline is the result of the system's fundamental design. It is one good day in the middle of a terminal diagnosis. Virginia McGuire, a leading USGS scientist who has authored foundational reports on the aquifer, has documented the bigger picture for decades. The blips of recovery are consistently erased by the overwhelming trend of decline. One wet year does not undo 70 years of overdraft. The response on the ground has been a frantic, piecemeal effort to stave off the inevitable. In 2012, Kansas pioneered an innovative legal framework called Local Enhanced Management Areas, or LEMAs. This was a radical idea. It gave local farmers, the very people pumping the water, the power to vote to legally restrict themselves. In a LEMA, communities of irrigators can agree to binding caps on their own water use, trying to stretch the life of their section of the aquifer. It is a textbook example of a community trying to solve its own tragedy of the commons. It is also, in the grand scheme of things, a finger in a dike riddled with structural cracks. A LEMA in one corner of Kansas cannot reverse the economic momentum of national agricultural policy or the billion-dollar investments demanding more, not less, water. It is a noble, necessary, and likely insufficient gesture against a force of continental scale. Dr. Famiglietti frames the problem with a simple, devastating analogy. If groundwater is our retirement account, our savings for the future, then surface water, lakes, and rivers is our checking account. He says, we're managing the checking account here and turning a blind eye to the retirement account. For 75 years, the High Plains have been living extravagantly off their retirement savings, and the balance is now flashing red. So what does the end look like? It doesn't look like a single day when a closed sign is hung on the aquifer. The end is a slow, creeping process. It is already happening. It looks like a farmer in the Texas Panhandle drilling a new well, tens of thousands of dollars deeper than his grandfather's, and hitting not the torrent of water he expected, but a flow so reduced he can no longer irrigate his entire cotton crop. It looks like a bank officer in Kansas looking at a satellite map of water depletion and quietly declining a loan to a family that has farmed the same land for a century. It is the slow, unceremonious conversion of a global breadbasket back into the great American desert. The circles of green will turn back to the dusty brown of unirrigated prairie. The land will still be there, the farmers will still be there. But the water, the engine of the entire enterprise, will be too deep, too expensive, too slow to be of any economic use. And those billion-dollar cheese factories, they will stand as monuments, gleaming, state-of-the-art facilities with a design life of 50 years, built in a place where the primary input for their product might have a functional life of less than 30. It is a paradox written in steel and concrete across the plains, a testament to a faith in markets and technology that seems to be directly contradicted by the geological data pouring in from the government's own scientists. The dairy industry is betting that it can outrun the science. History suggests that is a losing wager. The final reports from 2025 and early 2026 form a chilling chorus. The USG's report from hydrologist Virginia McGuire and her team established the 9% loss since pre-development. The University of Nebraska report confirmed the persistent drought-driven decline of 0.29 feet in 2025. The Kansas Geological Survey noted the record-shattering 1.52-foot drop in GMD3 for 2024, and the Earth's Future study in June 2026 put the final stamp on it, labeling the Western decline, the Ogallala's decline, as fundamentally irreversible. Each report is another nail. Each data point is another shovelful of dirt. There is no single villain in this story. The farmers are not villains. They are responding to economic incentives that were set in Washington, D.C., and trying to feed their families and the country. The politicians are not villains. They are responding to the demands of their constituents for economic security today, not geological stability in 100 years. The companies building the cheese factories are not villains. They are pursuing a business opportunity in a region that desperately wants the jobs. It is a system in which every participant is acting rationally in their own self-interest, and the collective result is a slow-motion catastrophe. 3 questions now hang over the 111.8 million acres of the High Plains. How do you tell a nation that a significant portion of its food supply is dependent on a non-renewable, rapidly diminishing resource? When the final cost of pumping the last dregs of this fossil water exceeds the value of the crops it can grow, what happens to the economy of 8 states? And what does it mean when the smartest people in the room, the bankers with all the data, start backing away from the table while the builders are still laying the foundation? The water that fell as snow on the primeval Rocky Mountains 12,000 years ago is right now being pulled through a 6-inch pipe in the Texas Panhandle. It will be shot through a center pivot irrigator to water a field of corn that will be fed to a cow whose milk will go to a brand new cheese plant that sits above a water table that has fallen 100 feet since 1950. The pumps are still running. The great mining continues, 24 hours a day. And somewhere deep in the earth, beneath the notice of the markets, the politicians, and the farmers, the water level is dropping another thousandth of an inch, silently, in the dark.